Okay, welcome everyone to another episode of Quarantine Chats. Yes, I have gotten a haircut. Thank you for asking. I really appreciate it. My guest with me here today is my good friend, Cassie Brouillard. Cass, what's going on?
Well, I'm in my meditation closet right now, and
You're what now?
my meditation closet. Yeah, this is where I do all my prayer, my journaling, and yeah, it's a nice space.
I have never heard of this meditation closet before, so you're definitely going to have to explain more about that to me.
Okay, will do.
So, just for a little bit of background, if you guys remember, a couple of weeks back, I interviewed Rose, who was another one of my community members from my service year last year, and Cassie is also one of my community members. We served together as Cap Corps volunteers at Capuchin Youth and Family Ministries, and now Cassie has retreated back to the Green Mountains of New Hampshire. So that's where she's currently at. So Cass, the way we've been starting most of these off with the other people that I've had on is give me just let's chat a little bit about what your quarantine experience has been like. So it's been, I think for us here in Connecticut, it was like March 16th is when offices started to close down and that sort of thing. I don't know exactly if the timeline was the same, but what's it been like for you being home and being quarantined?
Yeah, so it also started March 12th for us, quarantine.
Okay.
On there. So until like 2 weeks ago, I hadn't gone anywhere other than for walks.
Wow.
Since March 12th. So a week, I think it was a week or so ago, I went to Trader Joe's, which was an experience. It's my first outing. And yeah, so that was a rip roar. But other than that, so I've actually been home since January. So I've kind of been living the partial quarantine life since like January. Since I took a semester off from school. So I feel like I was kind of already a little bit in the quarantine mode. I had a little bit of a routine down of like things that I did at home. But it's but not being able to go out, that's been interesting, even as an introvert. Because I like to go to like coffee shops and stuff. Just to listen to people.
Yeah. No, we all have our subtle joys of people watching. I don't think anyone would deny that under pressure. It's interesting that you talk about how you still miss going out even as an introvert, because that's kind of the meat of our conversation today. I want to chat a little bit about personality types and how different personality types react to, this kind of quarantine experience. And sometimes we think of, there are tons of personality quizzes out there, like which Hogwarts house are you? Or, which cast member from Saturday Night Live, I don't know, insert television show here are you? That sort of thing. But there's some out there that are actually really good and can give us, legitimate insight into ourselves and how we might react to things. So the service year that Cass and I did together, we went through this kind of pretty intense, like month and a half orientation period beforehand, getting us ready to do ministry for the whole year. And a part of that was they had us take 2 separate personality tests and then compare with the other community members so we could know what we're all good at, where we might need building up, and how we could all work together. And the one I want to focus the most on is the Myers-Briggs. This is the one that most of you have probably heard of. Your personality type is 4 letters. Cass, you are INFJ?
Yes, but not sure. I might be INFP.
INFP. Oh, wow. Father Eric would be so glad to hear that.
I know.
So, yeah, and I know you guys might not know what that means right now, but we'll delve into it a little bit. I am XNFJ. I think I'm XNFJ. Yes, that's what I am. X is just what you get when you're a direct split between the different things. I want to focus on that first letter because the I for you stands for introvert. The X for me is a split between introvert and extrovert, but for most of my life, I've considered myself more of an extrovert than an introvert. I like talking to people, that sort of thing. So kind of separate from quarantine, let's talk about what those mean a little bit and maybe what some of the common misconceptions are. So let's hear from you first. Tell me what it means to be an introvert and what people might be wrong about introverts.
So introvert is basically you need to get you need time alone and time to recharge, whereas like extroverts get their energy from being around other people. Introverts get their energy from being alone. So for me, I like to think of myself as like an extra introvert because I need a lot of alone time.
Really?
But like
you?
Yeah. Like when we were volunteering together, we were doing a bunch of retreats during the day and with people all the time. I really needed like at least an hour or two when I got home to be with myself and my thoughts, and because my energy was just drained. So I guess a myth would be that some people think that introverts like aren't social, which there's a difference between being social and being an introvert, because a lot of my friends I know are like honestly like the lives, but like they still need the time after they
right
come back from an event or something.
Yeah, I think that's the most common misconception about introvert versus extrovert is it's not, oh, you're shy or, you like time to yourself, so you must be an introvert, or, you do well in crowds and you're the life of the party, so you must be an extrovert. It's where you get your energy from. So for you, you can be in a group. Might not be your favorite thing in the world, but I've seen you do it many, many times. But you need to recharge from that by being by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Extroverts can be by themselves and be perfectly fine sitting, in a grassy knoll reading a book for an hour or something like that. But they need to recharge from that by being with people. So I think I'm glad you touched on that, because that's at least the most common myth that I've heard. And I'm sure as an introvert, you might get kind of the brunt of that a little bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, sorry. I don't mean to cut you off.
Oh no, you're good.
There's like a half-second delay on some of these, so I'm still working on my timing of like when to cut in, when to cut out. So I'll speak just a little bit about what it means to be more extroverted, because that is for most of my life how I've viewed myself. It means that you draw your energy from being with people. So I really enjoy like game nights, as Cass can tell you firsthand. One of my favorite things to do is just grab a bunch of people and sit down and play a board game and, banter and trash talk across the table and, just hang out like that. I think I'm probably the only person who enjoyed middle school dances because, despite the pervasive awkwardness of them, I did enjoy, all my friends around and, they've got the music way too loud and all the lights are off and it's super cool. So that's drawing your energy from groups of people, doing things that involve socializing and others is more of the extrovert thing. I now realize that I'm a little bit of both. But that's not something I realized until our, could you hear that?
Yes.
Okay. I think somebody's hammering outside. We're just going to let that go.
Okay.
I was like, is that on your or mine? Anyways, apologies for that. So I didn't realize that I was kind of a split between introvert and extrovert until our service year when we did these tests. So I think that's really interesting. So moving towards how your introversion has affected you during quarantine specifically, how has that kind of manifested? What have been the hardest and the easiest parts of being an extrovert during quarantine specifically?
So, I think one of the positives out of this whole quarantine is just not feeling pressured to go places all of the time. Because I think a lot of the times, and I'm sure other introverts feel this way, we feel guilty for wanting to spend time by ourselves. And for example, like last year in our community, I feel like, well, we understood each other pretty well, so this wasn't really a problem. But I feel like in other communities, it could be the case where like someone's in their room and like people don't understand why you're in your room all the time. Where it's like, well, I'm recharging. But I'd say during quarantine, I've been able to do a lot of reading. One of the things I do is I write music and play music a lot. So that's been something that I've been able to really put my time into without the distractions of, I need to go out and hang out with someone. But I'd say the challenges, so as much as I like alone time, there have been times where I've been very restless because I have still wanted to be around people. And I think as an introvert, I like being in the company of others in like a quiet space, even if we're not chatting or doing something like a game night or something. I just like being around that. So that's been something I've missed.
That, yeah, it makes me think of, when you charge your phone and if you leave your phone plugged in when it's fully charged, it'll actually like drain the battery a little bit more. So even when it says 100%, it's really like 93. Dumbest thing in the world, but it applies. Yeah.
That's a good metaphor.
See, I did my homework, Cass. You know, I got to come prepared. Yeah, I think that's first of all, I like that you mentioned like you do enjoy being around people and you do enjoy being social to a degree, even if you're just kind of sitting there and both reading in the same room, there's still that human connection. And I really do want to break down that myth that introverts just want to be alone all the time. Yeah. It's because you can only recharge so much without something to recharge from. So if you're, being an introvert and having all of this alone time and being able to recharge is awesome, but you can only you're hitting your phone battery's peak. It's starting to be driven down a little bit. So I think that's interesting that's an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think in terms of the more extroverted side of things, there is a real check on your extroverted friends. Let me put it that way. Yeah. This period of time has definitely been difficult for us all, but I would venture to say that it's likely been more difficult for those of us who are extroverted versus those of us who are introverted. Mainly because the extroverted, while our introverts have all of the recharging and nothing to recharge from, our extroverts have no recharging and everything to recharge from.
Yeah.
So we both know plenty of extroverts, some of whom lived in community with us last year, and it has to be really, really difficult. I mean, I feel myself, I want to go and I want to go hang out with my friends and play some Madden. I want to go to the movies, I want to go for a hike with a group of buddies or something like that. But that's not, well, maybe a hike, socially distanced, something like that's starting to become a possibility. But, for these last 3 months, it's been like, all right, hard freeze on in-person socializing. And that's very difficult, especially I'm kind of extroverted, but those who are way into that category, I mean, I'm sure you probably have people in mind who are really struggling with that. I mean, what do you perceive to be the biggest challenges of being on the extroverted side of things during this time?
So one of my older sisters is an extrovert. And it's actually a good thing that she's a nurse, because she's one of the people who actually go out and see people still.
Yeah.
But yeah, she's been like itching to, like, she can't stay still even in quarantine. She's been finding loopholes to see people safely, obviously. But
I was gonna say,
but yeah, I can tell she's definitely going stir crazy. I think the most difficult thing is, like, I was talking to Andrew, who we lived with last year, and he was saying how he just like really misses, like, I think it's different for, whereas like I get energy from just being with people, I think Andrew, for example, gets energy from like interacting with people and like super involved. When
Andrew gets energy from arguing with Regis about sports. Yeah. That's what that's where he and I share in that.
Yeah. So I feel like, and even though he was saying he's able to do that on Zoom and things like that, it's different when you're not in the physical presence of someone. So yeah, I think that's the biggest difference, I guess. And although I will say, so I think it's a good challenge for some extroverts, because I was really pushed to my max during our community year in terms of pushing myself, finding my boundaries as an introvert and pushing those boundaries. And so I think it can be a real learning experience for a lot of extroverts, like how far can they push themselves? I think it's good to find those boundaries.
This is like Revenge of the Introverts.
Yeah.
It's like a zombie movie or something like that. Yeah, I that's not something that I've really thought about, but I like where you're going with it. Not in terms of, and I don't think this is how you're saying it. I paid my dues in the extrovert world, so now it's your turn. It's more like, we should all. The reason we talk about these personality tests is that they help us to know ourselves better, right? And the better that you know yourself, the better you might be able to make positive change in your life. If you know you're an extrovert, you might do better with communal prayer than you do with contemplative prayer. That's that if you know you're an introvert, maybe you don't necessarily want to join a 20-person Bible study. You instead want to get a devotional book and do something on your own. I mean, there's, that's just in the spiritual context. This is your whole life. It's important to know these things. So it is a good learning experience for those of us with extroverted tendencies to find those limits, feel exactly how much socializing and physical presence we need to, continue on and like still feel like we're doing something with our time. But also to recognize that we can be okay, without that. Just like last year, you had to recognize that you can be okay with a little less alone time than you would like. It was hard, certainly. And I remember, especially early in the year, that was something that you were really kind of working through. And one of the beauties and difficulties of intentional community is those kind of searching moments. But a point that you mentioned about the Zoom is good and, online meetings, great. Sure. It's wonderful that we've been able to make those work, but it's not the same as being in the physical room. We had an awesome discussion at our NGD. For, if you don't know, Cass, that's the next generation of disciples. That's our youth group. Shout out. We had an awesome discussion at our NGD Zoom meeting this past Wednesday about what they miss about the Mass, specifically with, different churches and dioceses starting to release some guidelines of how to slowly and safely reopen. And the common thread was that the space you're in matters. And it's very different going to Mass in your living room on a screen than going to Mass in God's house with the community all around you. So I think even as an introvert, could you speak a little bit about how being in a space with someone, kind of like you mentioned earlier, what does that give you that you can't get through a screen?
So I think when I'm like talking to someone or I'm watching Mass on TV through a screen, or if I'm having a conversation with someone like we are now, I feel like it just seems less real to me. So, I mean, obviously our whole like faith around the Eucharist is like a very tangible faith. So I think that I think it just kind of mentally for me, I lose some of like this is like real. This is a real connection that's happening. And yeah, I guess that's how I would describe it. Just like when I'm talking to like my siblings on the phone or something, I think a lot of people, their love language is physical touch and like being with people and hugging people. And I think that not having that physical connection is really hard for people, whether you're extrovert or introvert.
Yeah, good. Thanks for sticking that in at the end, because it's not love languages are a whole other sector that we could do a whole nother episode of quarantine chats on. But there's everybody, whether introverted or extroverted, has a need to be around other people to some degree. And this is like the minor league version of that, but it can't replace the bigger thing. We can go watch a Hartford Yard Goats game, and that's awesome, but it's nothing like going to Fenway and watching the Red Sox play. It's cool, it's nice, but it's not quite there. So we've talked a lot about our community members last year and some of the interactions there. So I want to talk about a very recent interaction that you had with one of our community members last year, who is very close to, if there was we talked about different scales of the volunteers last year. And I think you are by far the most introverted of us, I would say. It's like a tie between Gina and Danielle for the most extroverted in my mind. So you had a visit from Gina. Was it last weekend?
Yes, last weekend. Yes.
Last weekend. Okay. So Gina you'll probably see her at some point. Those of you watching this, I'm trying to include all of my community members on here in some capacity. But Gina is the most bubbly person you will ever meet. And she's always doing something, she's here, she's there. Gina's always moving, going, chatting, thinking. So that I imagine that must have been a huge shift from where you've been in, kind of introvert world. So first of all, what was it like seeing someone that's not family? And second of all, what was it like having those two different types of personalities, in this enclosed space, kind of out of nowhere.
So I guess first of all, it was really great seeing someone other than my family, because it was kind of like the realization that, like, there are other people in this world. There's people that I'm living with. So yeah, that was really great. We were kind of we didn't get to hug or anything because I was trying to be safe, socially distanced, but it was just really great being, like I said, being in the presence of someone else. As far as our different extremes of introversion and extroversion, honestly, like, I'd say the first day, it was good for me to, like, kind of how we were talking about before with the phone and, like, being able to have something to recharge from. It actually gave me energy, like, being around someone again. But then I would say by, like, the second day, I was like, I'm actually, like, I'm starting to feel tired. Like, I'm starting to feel the difference here. Because I think my quarantine routine was a little thrown off. We got, like, curbside pickup from different restaurants. We went for a walk. And Gina was, like, chatting with my mom the whole time. We were at home. She was loving it, and I'd be taking a nap to recharge.
That's Cassie.
Yeah. So it was a little difficult, I'd say, by the second or third day. Just, like, getting used to having someone else in the house.
Right.
But also, I just, like, noticed the difference between me and Gina at our dinner conversations, because both my dad and Gina are big, like, history buffs.
Yep.
And so he finally had someone to talk to about all the stuff that he talks to me and my mom about, but we never engage.
I feel like that's all dads.
Yeah, so they were having
all dads. They all have something that, like, they talk to their family about, and the family, like, is like, whatever, dad, cool. And then someone comes in who actually cares, and it's like, oh snap, here we go.
Yeah. So, whereas I was, like, kind of sitting quietly the whole meal, but yeah, I think that's kind of one of the, I guess, differences I saw throughout the week. But I mean, Gina also needed time to recharge sometimes, so it worked. She would go upstairs in our little guest space, and we had our alone time, and then got back together for something. So it worked.
Absolutely, yeah. That's, I think, the way that you guys were able to really enjoy your visit and also accept and appreciate the differences in your personalities and when each other needed time and that sort of thing is, I think that is a direct result of the fact that when we worked together and lived together for the year, we all took these personality tests together. And so we could appreciate and respect the differences in each other's personalities. Like, we're this group of 6 completely different people who were thrust into working together and living together 24/7. Boom, like that. That is a huge adjustment to make, but kind of forged in the fires of intentional community was this, I think, a really healthy respect and appreciation for each other's differences. In what we need and in our personality. So it's I could see how someone who didn't live in our community could, in a similar situation, might be very uncomfortable with one person needing this time and another person needing this time, or whatever it might be. But I would encourage people to, kind of mine this a little bit and maybe do this with your families. if you're a young person and you bring this personality test to your family and you're like, all right, great, we're going to make our household more, more cohesive and more peaceful. Mom and dad are going to be like, all right, that's weird, but I'm kind of on board. So anyways, that's one part. Secondly, you mentioned something yes. Okay. So we were talking about that overcharging and needing something to recharge from. I'm gonna quote my man Thanos here and say that all life needs a balance, right? So we've been so unbalanced during this time of all the alone time and no socializing time. So when Gina came to visit you, would you say that it was perfectly balanced, as all things should be?
Yeah.
That's my my little Infinity War joke. But I think that's finding that balance, especially as we start to open up a little bit more, is going to be really important for all of us, whether we're introverted or extroverted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it was refreshing. I think that's a good word to describe it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds about right. Refreshing. Mm-hmm. So there's the Myers-Briggs is one personality test that we did last year. I want to talk very briefly about another one that we did. Not nearly in as much detail because it's not as easy to explain, but it's called the Enneagram. And I personally like the Enneagram a little bit better. I feel like it's a little better descriptor, but both the Enneagram and the Myers-Briggs have their advantages and disadvantages. So can you just give us a brief rundown of what the Enneagram is and then tell us a little bit about your Enneagram number?
Okay. So this is probably going to be a bad explanation, but you can Google it after. So the Enneagram, basically there are 9 types, and 9 types of people. And it's like, I guess the main thing it's modeled after is like each type has like like a core desire and a core fear. So that's kind of how it's modeled. But there are actually a lot of layers to the Enneagram once you like really get into it. So for those of you who think that it's typing you and like don't want to fit into a box, it's actually like a lot more complex, and so it there's room for like a lot of nuances in people. And but anyway, so I am a type 4 with a wing 5. Wings are basically like they add that a little extra flair to
little spice.
Yeah, a little spice. So basically like my like core desire, I guess you could say, in Enneagram language is to be authentic and to be able to like express myself authentically. So like a big value of mine is like being creative and figuring out how to express that in a unique way. And then the 5 basically adds some thinking mentality to it. 4 is basically described as like the feeler, the more like emotional one. So 5 adds that like thinking layer. How I like to think about things, but yeah.
That was one of the cooler experiences, was trying to guess everyone's Enneagram type last year. But the reason I like the Enneagram a little bit better than the Myers-Briggs is because of that kind of layered aspect that you were talking about. I think it goes a little bit deeper. The Myers-Briggs is a very good descriptor of people. I think it describes personality types very well. But the Enneagram examines them a little bit better and digs into the why behind the personality types and behind how they act. So I think it's super cool. My type is a 2, which is it's called the helper, quote unquote, but basically it's the the core desire is to help people, to make them feel welcome, to make them feel wanted, that sort of thing. So it fits really well with youth ministry, thank goodness. And my wing is, I know this isn't how you're supposed to do it, but I don't really care. My wing is a 9. Technically, my wing should be a 1 or a 3. It gets confusing. Don't worry about it. My wing is a 9. Don't ask questions. And the 9 is the peacemaker. So it's kind of to keep the peace, to help her. The 2 is to make people happy, and the 9 is to keep people happy. That's kind of how I like to describe it. So I would seriously recommend that people check both of these out, because not only can they help bring peace to your workplace, your school, your sports team, your family, whatever, they can also help you to know yourself better and learn. And the better you know yourself, the better you're going to be able to have a relationship with the Lord, because he knows you better than you know yourself. But the closer you can get to that, the easier dialogue you're going to be able to have. Have your Enneagram and Myers-Briggs results, I guess, had a positive impact on your relationship with the Lord, your faith, or your spiritual life?
Yeah, so I actually, well, I think one of the things it's helped me with is kind of giving more grace to myself, in terms of not like giving myself an excuse for like doing the things that I do, but helping me understand maybe why I would be more inclined to do the things that I do, or be interested in the things I am. And I think that is helpful in figuring out how I want to grow as a person, and how I want to grow in my relationship with God. And then the second thing is it's helped me understand other people better. So I think I can have more patience and grace with other people, knowing that they're also working on things within themselves, and they also have their own fears and things that they struggle with. So I think it's helped me understand myself and people better when I go to the Lord in prayer, and just like gives a better earthly context to things that that would come up in prayer. I
think that's the perfect way of describing it. It helps you to understand why you might do certain things and might be drawn to certain things, and that can help focus your prayer, and that can help make your prayer more effective. And the Lord wants us to know ourselves. He doesn't want us to kind of sit in mystery. He is actively trying to help us find ourselves, and faith is a great vehicle through which to do that. So I think these personality tests are, while on the surface they may seem secular, especially the Enneagram is intrinsically tied to our faith, because knowing how we do things, why we do things, what our tendencies are. I mean, that's the struggle of every human, is learning what our negative tendencies are, what sins we're tempted into, how to avoid those sins, what good we can do, and how to further that good. That's how to be human. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Like that's that's the path to heaven. Avoid temptation, avoid sin, do good. I mean, it's a lot less complicated than it looks on the surface. So I will put a link in the description of this video to something called Free Personality Test 16 Personalities. It is a Myers-Briggs test that you can do online by yourself. Probably take you 5 minutes, and it'll give you your Myers-Briggs thing. There's not really a Enneagram test that I can offer to anyone watching this video, because the intention of the Enneagram is for you to read up on the different types and then decide which one you are for yourself based on which one feels the closest to you. So it sounds a little hokey, I know, but trust me, that's the better way to do it. So I don't want to encourage kind of the half-baked Enneagram way of doing things. But the Myers-Briggs test, I'll leave in the description. Cass, as we start to come in for a landing here, do you have any final parting thoughts on introversion, extraversion, and quarantine?
Yeah, I guess I'd say a real blessing of the quarantine as an introvert is I feel like my prayer life has definitely grown a lot. I feel like I've made that a priority as an introvert. And I feel like being able to have like the freedom to listen to God in a more like intimate way has been really helpful for me. And yeah, I think there have been like less distractions, or like I said, I think it's easy for me to like feel guilty that I'm not, I don't know, being more active, doing more active things in the church, which obviously is important. Being around groups all the time and helping out. But I think it's been a blessing to just be able to sit in silence and really take advantage of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think there is a piece of introvert in all of us. And I think we can, even as this time, starts to end in some degree and things start to open up a little bit more, there's still time to tap into that, and there's still time to use that for good, especially in your faith life. So I think that's as good a spot as any to wrap up. But Cass, look at this. You have just talked for 42 straight minutes as an introvert. Amazing.
Wow. Crazy.
Crazy. Well, thank you so much for coming and hanging out. It's just personally, it's good to see you and see that you're doing well up in the frigid mountains. And hopefully, if things start to open up a little bit more, we can get together at some point over the summer and go for a hike.
Yes. And it's actually 89 here, so I wouldn't say it's frigid.
Well, I'm glad I'm in Connecticut then. All right, Cass. Well, thank you so much, and we'll talk to you soon, all right?
Okay. Thanks, Regis.
All right. Peace out.